I knew something was wrong the moment I pulled into my cul-de-sac and saw the construction equipment parked on what should have been my empty lot. My name is Zachary Palmer, and I had spent the last 3 years saving every penny to buy that half-acre plot of land next to my house in Meadowbrook Estates, just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. The plan was simple. Tear down the old storage shed that came with it, landscape the area, and maybe build a workshop where I could finally pursue my woodworking hobby without my wife complaining about sawdust in the garage. But as I sat there in my truck, staring at the bright yellow excavator and the wooden framework of what looked suspiciously like a jungle gym, I felt my blood pressure spike. I didn't even turn off the engine before I was out of the vehicle, my boots hitting the pavement hard as I marched toward the construction site. A crew of about 5 workers were busy mixing concrete, assembling slides, and installing what appeared to be a swing set on my property. My property. "Hey," I shouted, waving my arms. "What the hell is going on here?" A burly man in a hard hat looked up from his clipboard, his expression somewhere between confused and annoyed. "Can I help you? This is my land," I said, pointing at the ground beneath his feet. "I own this lot." "Who authorized this construction?" The man's face went pale. He fumbled with his clipboard, flipping through pages. "We got our work order from the HOA. They said this was community property designated for a new playground." Community property? I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. "I bought this lot 6 months ago. I have the deed in my house right now. This isn't community property, it's mine." The foreman's eyes went wide. He pulled out his phone and started making calls, stepping away from me while his crew stood around looking uncertain. I pulled out my own phone and dialed my real estate attorney, Marcus Chen, who had handled the purchase of the lot. "Marcus, I need you to tell me I'm not losing my mind," I said when he picked up. "The HOA is building a playground on my lot without my permission." There was a long pause. "They're doing what?" You heard me. "There's literally a construction crew here right now installing playground equipment on the land I bought from the Peterson estate." "Zachary, that's trespassing at minimum, possibly destruction of property. Do you have your deed accessible?" "It's in my filing cabinet. I can have it in 2 minutes." "Get it. Take photos of everything. I'll make some calls." I hung up and sprinted back to my house, nearly bowling over my neighbor, Bill, who was standing in his driveway with his mouth hanging open. "Zach, what's happening over there?" "The HOA apparently thinks they can just build whatever they want on property they don't own," I called back, not slowing down. Inside, I grabbed the deed from my home office and took a moment to actually read through it again, even though I had practically memorized it. The legal description was clear. Lot 247, Meadowbrook Estates, comprising approximately 0.48 acres. It was mine. No easements, no shared use agreements, nothing that would give the HOA any right to touch it. When I got back outside, a silver Lexus SUV had pulled up, and I recognized the driver immediately. Patricia Winters, the HOA president, emerged wearing her typical uniform of pressed khakis and a polo shirt with the Meadowbrook Estates logo embroidered on it. She was probably in her mid-50s, with that specific haircut that seemed to be standard issue for neighborhood association tyrants, short and highlighted within an inch of its life. "Mr. Palmer," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I heard there was some confusion about our new community playground project." "Confusion?" I held up the deed. "There's no confusion, Patricia. This is my property. You're trespassing and you're building on land you have no right to touch." Her smile didn't waver, but I saw her eye twitch. "I think you're mistaken. The original development plans for Meadowbrook Estates designated this area for community use. The fact that it was temporarily sold to the Peterson family, and then to you doesn't change the underlying zoning. That's not how property ownership works, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I bought this land. I own it. Your development plans don't mean anything if the property has been deeded to a private owner. Well, we'll just have to see what our lawyers say about that, Patricia said, crossing her arms. In the meantime, this playground is a valuable community amenity that will benefit all residents, including you. I don't care if you're building a shrine to world peace. It's my land, and you're going to remove every piece of this equipment by the end of the week, or I'll do it myself. Patricia's fake smile finally cracked. You can't threaten the HOA, Mr. Palmer. We have rules and regulations that everyone agreed to when they purchased property here. And those rules don't give you the right to seize private property, I shot back. I'll be contacting my attorney, and if this equipment isn't gone, I'll be taking legal action. We'll see about that, Patricia said, turning on her heel and walking back to her Lexus. Before she drove off, she rolled down her window. You might want to check your HOA bylaws, Mr. Palmer. Section 12, subsection 4. Community improvement projects can be implemented on any property within the development for the greater good of all residents. She drove away before I could respond, leaving me standing there with the construction foreman, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Look, buddy, he said. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm just following the work order I got paid for. You got a problem, you need to sort it out with whoever hired us. Who hired you? I asked. Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. They paid us half upfront, half on completion. I nodded slowly. Okay, I'm going to contact my attorney and he's going to contact you. Until this is resolved, I need you to stop work immediately. The foreman shrugged. Can't do that without authorization from the people who hired us. If you got a legal claim, you need to go through the proper channels. We'll be back tomorrow morning to finish the installation. I watched them pack up their tools for the day, feeling completely helpless. This was insane. How could an HOA just decide to build on property they didn't own? I went back inside and called Marcus again. I found the bylaws she was talking about, I told him, but it can't possibly be legal. Read me the exact language, Marcus said. I pulled up the HOA documents on my computer and found Section 12, subsection 4. Community improvement projects deemed necessary by a majority vote of the HOA board may be implemented on any property within the Meadowbrook Estates development for the greater good of all residents. Property owners will be given 30 days' notice of such projects unless the board determines that immediate action is required for safety or community welfare. Marcus was quiet for a moment. That's one of the most egregious overreaches I've ever seen in an HOA bylaw. It's almost certainly unenforceable. You can't just void property rights with a neighborhood rule, but the fact that it's in their bylaws means they're going to fight this. So what do I do? First thing tomorrow, I'm filing for a temporary restraining order to stop all construction. Then we're going to send them a cease and desist letter. If they ignore that, we sue for trespassing, property damage, and probably a few other things I'll think of tonight. But Zachary, I need you to understand something. This is going to get expensive and ugly. I don't care, I said. They can't just steal my land. I agree completely. I'll start drafting the paperwork tonight. In the meantime, document everything. Photos, videos, keep copies of all communication. That night, I barely slept. I kept getting up to look out the window at the half-built playground equipment sitting on my lot like a middle finger made of metal and plastic. My wife, Sarah, was visiting her sister in Atlanta for the week, and I was almost glad she wasn't here to see this insanity. The next morning I was up at dawn, coffee in hand, waiting. Sure enough, at 7:30 the construction crew rolled up again. I walked out to meet them, my phone already recording video. "Gentlemen, I'm documenting that I've asked you not to work on this property as it's privately owned and you don't have permission from the owner." The foreman sighed. "Look, man, I get it, but I got a contract. You want to stop this, you get a court order." "That's being filed today," I said. "Then I guess I'll see you in court," he said, and waved his crew to get back to work. I stood there filming for another 20 minutes before I had to leave for my own job. I worked as a project manager for a construction company, which made this whole situation even more infuriating. I knew exactly how property rights worked, how permits functioned, how legal all of this wasn't. But knowing didn't help when there were 5 guys actively building a playground on land I had paid $130,000 for. At work, I could barely concentrate. I kept checking my phone for updates from Marcus. Finally, around 2 in the afternoon, he called. "Good news and bad news," he said. "Good news is the judge agreed to an emergency hearing tomorrow morning for the restraining order. Bad news is the HOA has already filed a counterclaim saying that you violated the community bylaws by refusing to allow a community improvement project. They're suing me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "They're claiming that by purchasing property in Meadowbrook Estates, you agreed to abide by all HOA rules, including Section 12, subsection 4. They're saying you're in breach of your agreement. But I never agreed to let them build on my property. I know. Their argument is garbage, but it means this is going to take longer to resolve. The judge isn't going to just shut down their construction without hearing their side. Marcus, they're actively building right now. Every hour they work is more damage, more trespassing. I know. We'll make that argument tomorrow. Can you be at the courthouse at 9 a.m.? I'll be there." I left work early and drove home to find the playground nearly completed. There was now a full swing set, a slide, a jungle gym, and they were in the process of pouring a rubber safety surface around everything. My lot, which I had planned to turn into a peaceful workshop space, looked like a public park. I took more photos and videos, noting the time and date on everything. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I walked over to the construction area and found a spot where they had staked out their work zone. The stakes were clearly 4 feet onto my property based on the survey I'd had done when I bought the lot. I pulled up the survey on my phone and took comparison photos. The playground wasn't just touching my property. It was entirely on my property. They hadn't built on the line or partially over. The whole thing was on my lot. That evening I got a knock on my door. It was Patricia Winters, accompanied by 2 other people I recognized from HOA meetings. One was Brenda Morrison, the vice president, and the other was Kevin Schaefer, the treasurer. "Mr. Palmer," Patricia said, not bothering with pleasantries this time. "We're here to formally notify you that you're in violation of HOA regulations. You have 24 hours to withdraw your legal action against the association, or will be forced to impose fines and potentially move to foreclose on your property for repeated violations." I stared at her. "You're threatening to foreclose on my property because I won't let you trespass on land I own. You're disrupting a community improvement project," Brenda chimed in. She was younger than Patricia, maybe 40, with the same aggressive energy. "We took a vote. The community wants this playground." "You're being selfish." "Did you take a vote on building it on my private property?" I asked. "Or did you conveniently leave that part out?" "The bylaws are clear," Kevin said. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who looked uncomfortable being there. "Community improvements can be placed where the board determines they're most needed." "Those bylaws don't supersede property law," I said. "And you're about to find that out in court tomorrow. Patricia's expression hardened. "You're making a big mistake, Mr. Palmer. This association has significant legal resources, and we protect our community from people who try to put their own interests above everyone else's." "Get off my porch," I said quietly. "And if you or anyone from the HOA steps foot on my property again without a court order, I'm calling the police." They left, but not before Patricia handed me an official-looking envelope. Inside was a notice of fine, $500 per day for obstruction of community improvement projects and failure to maintain community standards. I took a photo of it and texted it to Marcus with the message, "They're fining me for not letting them trespass." His response was immediate, "Don't pay it. That's extortion. Bring it tomorrow." The next morning, I put on my best suit and drove to the Mecklenburg County Courthouse in downtown Charlotte. Marcus met me outside, his own suit crisp and his briefcase looking heavy with documentation. "They're bringing 3 attorneys," he told me. "The HOA doesn't mess around." 3 attorneys for a playground dispute. It's not about the playground anymore. It's about control. If they lose this, it sets a precedent that property owners can challenge their authority. We walked into the courtroom, and I saw Patricia sitting in the front row with Brenda and Kevin. Behind them were at least a dozen other Meadowbrook residents, presumably there to show community support for the playground. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s named Judge Victoria Harrison, called the hearing to order at 9 on the dot. Marcus presented our case first, laying out the property deed, the survey, and photographic evidence of the construction. He argued that the HOA had no legal right to build on privately owned property, regardless of what their bylaws said, and that every hour they continued construction was an ongoing trespass. Then the HOA's lead attorney, a slick guy in an expensive suit named Richard Blackstone, stood up. "Your Honor, this isn't a simple property dispute. When Mr. Palmer purchased his home and his lot in Meadowbrook Estates, he signed a covenant agreeing to abide by all HOA rules and regulations. Those regulations, which were properly filed and recorded, explicitly allow for community improvement projects. The playground in question was approved by a unanimous board vote and serves the interests of over 300 families in the development." Judge Harrison looked at the bylaws. "Mr. Blackstone, this Section 12, Subsection 4 seems to suggest the HOA can appropriate any private property for community use. Is that your position?" "Not appropriate, Your Honor. Utilize for the common good. The property owner still maintains ownership and pays taxes. We're simply exercising the rights granted to the association by covenant." "That's insane," I whispered to Marcus. He put a hand on my arm to keep me quiet. Judge Harrison frowned. "Mr. Chen, does your client's deed contain any language about these community rights?" "No, Your Honor." "The deed is free and clear. There are no easements, no shared use agreements, nothing that would give the HOA construction rights. But the HOA covenants are recorded with the county," Blackstone interjected. "They run with the land. Anyone purchasing property in Meadowbrook Estates is bound by them." Judge Harrison was quiet for a long moment, reading through documents. Finally, she looked up. "I'm going to issue a temporary restraining order stopping all construction pending a full hearing on the merits. This court needs time to properly evaluate whether an HOA covenant can effectively void private property rights. The construction crew is ordered to cease work immediately. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks for a full evidentiary hearing." It was a partial victory. The construction would stop, at least for now. But as we left the courtroom, Patricia cornered me in the hallway. "You just cost this community a playground that our children desperately need," she hissed. "I hope you're proud of yourself." "I didn't cost anyone anything," I said. You chose to build on property you don't own instead of working with me to find a solution. Working with you. You're not even part of this community. You barely attend meetings, you don't volunteer, you just want to keep everyone else from having nice things. I want to keep people from building on my land without permission. If that makes me a villain in your eyes, I don't really care. She stormed off, and I noticed several of the other residents glaring at me. Great. I was now the neighborhood pariah for having the audacity to assert my property rights. Over the next 2 weeks, things got worse. I started receiving anonymous letters in my mailbox, calling me selfish and greedy. Someone egged my house. My tires were slashed twice. I filed police reports, but without evidence of who was doing it, there wasn't much the cops could do. The HOA also ramped up their harassment. I received notices of violation for everything they could think of. My grass was allegedly too long, even though I'd mowed it 3 days earlier. My garbage cans were visible from the street for more than 12 hours after pickup. I had parked my work truck in my driveway overnight, which apparently violated some obscure rule about commercial vehicles. Each violation came with a fine. By the end of the first week, they'd fined me over $3,000. I didn't pay any of it, and Marcus assured me it was all retaliatory and unenforceable, but it was stressful as hell. Sarah came back from Atlanta and was horrified by what had happened. This is insane, Zach. Can't we just let them have the playground? Is it really worth all this? It's the principle, I said. If I let them do this, what's next? They decide they want to put in a community pool and just take someone's backyard. They want a parking lot and pave over someone's garden. There have to be limits. She sighed but didn't argue further. She knew I was right, even if the practical part of her hated the conflict. The evidentiary hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning. Marcus had prepared extensively, finding case law from across the country about HOA overreach and property rights. We had expert witnesses ready to testify about property law and the limits of covenant authority. But the day before the hearing, something happened that changed everything. I got a call from Bill, my neighbor, the one who'd watched the initial construction with confusion. "Zach, you need to come over here. I found something you're going to want to see." I walked over to his house, and he led me to his garage. On his workbench was a stack of old documents, yellowed with age. "I bought my house from the original developer's son," Bill explained. "When I was cleaning out the garage last night, I found these in a box. They're the original development plans for Meadowbrook Estates from 1987. I started flipping through them, not sure what I was looking for. Then Bill pointed to a specific page. It was a plat map of the entire development, and there, clearly marked, was Lot 247. My lot. But it wasn't designated as community space. It was marked as Private Residential Lot Future Development. "This proves it," I said, excitement building. "The HOA's claim that it was always meant to be community space is a lie." "There's more," Bill said. He showed me another document, this one labeled Meadowbrook Estates Master Association Bylaws Original 1987. I read through them quickly. Section 12 existed, but subsection 4 was completely different. The original language said, "Community improvement projects may be implemented on property designated and owned by the HOA for the common use of all residents." They changed it, I breathed. Someone amended the bylaws to remove the part about the HOA actually having to own the property. Bill nodded. I checked the amendment records at the county. The bylaw was changed in 2019, right after Patricia Winters became president, and look at the vote record. He showed me the meeting minutes. The amendment had passed, but only 17 homeowners had been present for the vote out of over 300 in the development. There was a note that said, "Special meeting notice sent via email only." They snuck it through, I said. They held a special meeting, barely publicized it, and changed the rules to give themselves power to build on private property. Take it to your lawyer, Bill said. And Zach, I'm sorry I didn't say anything earlier. I didn't realize what they were doing was this wrong. I thanked him and practically ran back to my house to call Marcus. When I explained what I'd found, I could hear the grin in his voice. This is exactly what we needed. If we can prove the bylaw amendment was improperly enacted, then it's void. And even if it wasn't, we can show that it was a recent change specifically designed to allow property appropriation. No judge is going to uphold that. The next morning, we walked into court with our new evidence. I could see the confidence on Patricia's face as she sat with her attorneys, clearly thinking they had this in the bag. Judge Harrison called the hearing to order, and Marcus immediately requested to submit additional evidence. He presented the original bylaws, the plat map, and the amendment records. Blackstone, the HOA attorney, tried to object, but Judge Harrison silenced him. She read through everything carefully, her expression growing darker by the minute. "Mr. Blackstone," she finally said, "were you aware that the bylaw your clients are relying on was only enacted in 2019 and represents a substantial change from the original covenant language?" Blackstone glanced at Patricia, who had gone pale. "Your Honor, the amendment was properly voted on and recorded. With 17 people present out of a 300-household development," Judge Harrison said, "and the notice was sent via email only. What's the requirement for bylaw amendments according to your association's governing documents?" There was frantic whispering between Blackstone and his team. Finally, he said, "Written notice must be provided to all homeowners at least 30 days prior to any vote on bylaw amendments." "And was that done?" Silence. "Mr. Blackstone, I asked you a question." "We're not certain of the notification method used in 2019, Your Honor." Judge Harrison set down the papers. "Here's what I am certain of. This court will not enforce an HOA bylaw that was improperly enacted and that purports to give a neighborhood association the right to appropriate private property without compensation. The restraining order is made permanent. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA is ordered to immediately remove all playground equipment and restore Lot 247 to its original condition at their expense. Furthermore, Mr. Palmer is entitled to damages for trespass, which we will determine in a separate proceeding." Patricia stood up. "Your Honor, you can't do this. Our community needs that playground." "Mrs. Winters, sit down," Judge Harrison said sharply. "If your community needs a playground, you can build it on property the HOA actually owns, or you can negotiate with Mr. Palmer to purchase or lease his property. What you cannot do is simply take what doesn't belong to you. This hearing is concluded." I felt like I could finally breathe for the first time in weeks. We'd won. Actually won. But as we left the courthouse, Patricia caught up with us in the parking lot. Her face was red, her eyes wild. "This isn't over," she said. "We'll appeal. We'll fight this all the way to the state Supreme Court if we have to." "You do that," Marcus said calmly, "and you'll lose again while running up legal bills that your homeowners will have to pay, or you could accept the ruling and move on." "That playground was going to be Patricia Winters Memorial Park," she said, and suddenly her motivation became crystal clear. This wasn't about the community. It was about her ego. "I've given 15 years to this association, and this was going to be my legacy." "Then maybe you should have built it on land the HOA owned," I said. "You brought this on yourself." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You've made an enemy today, Mr. Palmer. You have no idea what I'm capable of." That felt like a threat, and Marcus evidently thought so too. "Mrs. Winters, I'd be very careful about any further harassment or retaliation against my client. We're already documenting everything for a potential civil suit. Don't make it worse." She stormed off to her Lexus and peeled out of the parking lot like a teenager having a tantrum. "Is she going to be a problem?" I asked Marcus. "Probably. But she's on thin ice now. Any retaliation and we'll crush her in court." He was right, but that didn't make the next few days any less nerve-wracking. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Patricia to do something crazy. But nothing happened. The playground equipment sat on my lot, untouched for 3 days. Finally, I got fed up waiting for the HOA to comply with the court order. I called Marcus. "They're not removing the equipment," I said. "The court gave them 48 hours and it's been 72. "Then we file a contempt motion," he said. "But Zachary, there's another option. You could hire a demolition crew to remove it yourself and bill the HOA for the cost." That idea appealed to me on a visceral level. "Can I legally do that? The court order says they have to remove it." "If they're not complying, you have every right to mitigate your damages by doing it yourself. Just document everything, get receipts, and we'll add it to the judgment." I made some calls. My own construction company had a demolition division, and I knew the supervisor, Tony Ramirez, pretty well. When I explained the situation, he actually laughed. "So you want us to tear down a playground that the HOA built on your property without permission? That's exactly what I want. Man, I wish I could see their faces when we roll up. When do you want us there? How about tomorrow morning?" "Nice and early, say 7 a.m. We'll be there." That evening, I sent an email to the entire HOA board, copying Marcus. Per the court order dated date, the playground equipment must be removed from lot 247 immediately. As you have failed to comply within the specified time frame, I will be removing it myself tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. All costs will be added to the damages owed to me by the HOA. Patricia's response came within 5 minutes, all caps. "You will not touch that playground. We are appealing the ruling and the equipment stays until the appeal is heard." Marcus replied before I could. "Mrs. Winters, there is no stay of the court order pending appeal. The equipment must be removed per Judge Harrison's ruling. If you interfere with Mr. Palmer's legal removal of the equipment from his property, you will be in contempt of court." She didn't respond after that, but I had a feeling tomorrow was going to be interesting. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept imagining scenarios where Patricia and her supporters showed up to physically block the demolition crew, or where someone sabotaged the equipment, or a dozen other catastrophes. But when 7 a.m. rolled around, I was ready. Tony showed up with a small crew and 2 trucks, one with a crane attachment. I had coffee and donuts ready for them because I'm not a monster, and we reviewed exactly what needed to happen. "We're removing all the playground equipment, the rubber safety surface, the concrete footings, everything," I said. "I want my lot returned to grass." "You got it, boss," Tony said. "Though I gotta say, seems like a waste of a decent playground." It is a waste. But it was built without permission on property they don't own. Actions have consequences. We started with the swing set. The crane lifted the entire structure out of the ground, concrete footings and all, and loaded it onto one of the trucks. The noise was substantial, and within 10 minutes I had an audience. Bill came out to watch, giving me a supportive wave. Several other neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, some clearly unhappy with what was happening. And then, inevitably, Patricia's Lexus came screaming around the corner. She jumped out, still in her bathrobe, her hair unbrushed. Stop right now," Tony looked at me. I shook my head. "Keep working." Patricia ran toward the crane, and for a horrible moment I thought she was actually going to try to physically stop it. But Tony's crew had already anticipated that, Two of the guys stepped in front of her. "Madam, this is an active construction site. You need to stay back for your own safety." "This is my playground. You can't destroy it." "It's not your playground," I called over the noise of the machinery. "It's trespassing equipment on my property, and I'm removing it per court order." "I'm calling the police," she screamed. "Go ahead," I said. "I have the court order right here." She did call the police. Two officers showed up about 20 minutes later, just as we were loading the jungle gym onto the truck. Patricia ran to them immediately, gesturing wildly and clearly giving them an earful. One of the officers, a tall guy in his 30s, walked over to me. "Sir, can you explain what's going on here?" I handed him a copy of the court order. "The HOA built this playground on my property without permission. A judge ordered them to remove it. They didn't comply, so I'm doing it myself." He read through the document carefully, then looked at Patricia, who was still ranting to his partner. "And she's the HOA president." "That's correct." "Okay, well, this seems like a civil matter that's already been resolved by the court. We can't interfere with you executing a legal court order." He raised his voice so Patricia could hear. "Madam, you need to step back and let them work." "But they're destroying community property." "It's not community property, madam. It's on private land. The court has already ruled on this." Patricia looked like she might actually have a stroke. Her face was purple and she was shaking with rage. "This is not over. I will fight this. I will make your life hell, Zachary Palmer." The officer's expression hardened. "Madam, that sounds like a threat. I'm going to need you to calm down and go home." "I will not calm down. This is my community, and I will not let some selfish, greedy man destroy what we've built. Madam, final warning. Go home, or I'm going to have to cite you for disturbing the peace." Brenda, who had shown up at some point, finally stepped in and pulled Patricia away. They had a heated conversation by Patricia's car, and eventually, Patricia got in and drove off, tires squealing. The officer turned back to me. "You might want to consider getting a restraining order against her. She seems pretty unhinged." "I'm hoping now that the playground is gone, she'll move on." He shrugged. "Maybe, but people like that don't usually let things go. Just be careful." The crew worked for another 3 hours, removing every piece of equipment, digging up the rubber surface, and even pulling out the concrete footings. When they were done, my lot looked like a war zone, torn up and muddy, but empty of the HOA's trespassing playground. "We can come back next week and level it out, put down some topsoil and seed if you want," Tony offered. "That would be great." "Thanks, Tony. Send me the invoice." "Will do. And hey, if you ever need someone to tear down any more illegal HOA projects, you know who to call." I laughed, but it felt hollow. This whole thing had been so stupid and avoidable. If Patricia had just talked to me first, if she'd offered to buy or lease the lot, if she'd been willing to compromise at all, none of this would have happened. But she hadn't. She'd decided she could just take what she wanted. And now the community playground she'd dreamed of was sitting in pieces in a dump truck. Over the next week, I waited for the fallout. Marcus filed our damages claim, which included the cost of the demolition, the cost of restoring the lot, the cost of all our legal fees, and compensation for harassment and emotional distress. The total came to just over $90,000. The HOA's response was to hold an emergency meeting and vote to raise everyone's dues by $300 per year to cover legal expenses. The notice went out to all homeowners, and within hours, my email inbox was full of angry messages from neighbors blaming me for the increase. "You cost us the playground, and now you're costing us money. We should never have let you buy property here. I hope you're happy with yourself." I didn't respond to any of them. There was no point. They didn't want to hear that their HOA board had caused this problem by breaking the law. They just wanted someone to blame, and I was convenient. But not everyone was against me. Bill sent a supportive email, and a few other neighbors reached out privately to say they thought the HOA had been out of line. One woman, Jennifer Kowalski, told me she'd been fighting with Patricia for years over the HOA's authoritarian tendencies and was glad someone finally stood up to her. She runs this association like her personal fiefdom, Jennifer wrote. Half the board is afraid of her and the other half agrees with everything she says. We need new leadership. That gave me an idea. I called Marcus. Can HOA board members be removed? Depends on the bylaws. Why? Because I'm tired of being on defense. Maybe it's time to go on offense. He was quiet for a moment. You want to recall the board? I want Patricia Winters removed as president. She's already threatened me, she's harassing homeowners who support me, and she's racking up massive legal bills that everyone has to pay for. There have to be other people in this community who are sick of her. It's risky. You'll make even more enemies. I already have enemies. At least this way, maybe we can get some reasonable people in charge who won't try to seize private property. Marcus agreed to look into the recall process. It turned out that the Meadowbrook Estates bylaws did allow for board members to be recalled, but it required a petition signed by 30% of homeowners, followed by a special election. 30% of 300 households meant 90 signatures. It seemed impossible, but I had to try. I drafted a petition laying out Patricia's abuses. The illegal playground construction, the improper bylaw amendment, the retaliatory fines against me, the massive legal bills. I printed out 50 copies and started walking door to door. The first 10 houses I visited slammed the door in my face or told me to get lost. But at the 11th house, an older man named George Tucker invited me in. I've been waiting for someone to do this, he said, signing immediately. Patricia Winters is the worst thing that ever happened to this neighborhood. She fined me $2,000 last year because my mailbox was the wrong shade of black. The wrong shade of black. I had to repaint it 3 times before she approved it. Why didn't you fight it? I asked. Because I'm 73 years old, and I don't have the energy for a legal battle. But if enough of us band together, maybe we can finally get rid of her. George gave me a list of other homeowners he thought might be sympathetic. Over the next week, I collected signatures whenever I wasn't at work. It was slow going, and I got plenty of doors slammed in my face, but gradually the numbers added up. 50 signatures, 60, 70. And then Patricia found out what I was doing. I got a formal letter from the HOA attorney stating that I was engaging in harassment and defamation of board members, and demanding I cease immediately. Marcus fired back with our own letter pointing out that petition drives were protected activity under both the HOA bylaws and the First Amendment. The HOA backed off, but Patricia ramped up her campaign against me. She sent an email blast to all homeowners with the subject line, "The Truth About Zachary Palmer." In it, she painted me as a selfish outsider who didn't care about the community, who had cost them a playground and raised their dues, and who was now trying to destroy the HOA from within. It was complete garbage, but it was effective. My signature gathering slowed to a crawl. I was stuck at 76 signatures with 2 weeks left before the deadline. Then something unexpected happened. The local news picked up the story. A reporter named Michelle Torres from a Charlotte TV station called me. "Mr. Palmer, I'm doing a story on HOA overreach, and your case came up in my research. Would you be willing to be interviewed?" I checked with Marcus first. He was cautious but ultimately agreed it might help. "Just stick to the facts. Don't let them make you look like a villain." The interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday at my house. Michelle showed up with a camera crew and we talked for about an hour. I showed her the court order, the original plat map, the photos of the playground being built without my permission. I explained the bylaws issue and Patricia's threats. "And now you're trying to recall the HOA president?" Michelle asked. "I'm trying to bring accountability to an organization that's supposed to serve homeowners, not rule over them like a dictatorship. Patricia Winters broke the law, cost the community tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees, and refuses to take responsibility. Yes, I think she should be removed." The story aired 2 days later during the evening news. It was a 6-minute segment titled HOA Horror Stories, When Neighborhood Associations Go Too Far. They interviewed me, showed footage of the playground demolition, and even got a comment from Patricia, who somehow made herself look even worse. "Mr. Palmer is a troublemaker who doesn't understand community values," she said on camera, her expression condescending. "Sometimes individual property rights have to take a backseat to the common good." The reporter followed up. "But a judge ruled that the HOA violated Mr. Palmer's property rights. Do you accept that ruling?" "We're appealing," Patricia said stiffly. "Even though it's costing homeowners thousands of dollars in legal fees, the community supports the playground. Did the community support building it on private property without the owner's permission?" Patricia ended the interview at that point, but the damage was done. She looked like exactly what she was, an authoritarian bully who thought the rules didn't apply to her. The next day, my petition signatures started rolling in. People I'd never met came to my door asking to sign. I got emails from homeowners offering their support. Within 3 days, I had 120 signatures, well over the required 90. I submitted the petition to the HOA board on a Friday afternoon. Per the bylaws, they had to schedule a special election within 30 days. Patricia tried to fight it, claiming some of the signatures were invalid, but Marcus shot that down quickly. The election was scheduled for 4 weeks out, and suddenly, I was in the middle of a neighborhood political campaign. Jennifer Kowalski, the woman who'd reached out to support me earlier, agreed to run against Patricia for president. 2 other homeowners, both reasonable people who'd been fighting Patricia's overreach for years, agreed to run for the other contested board seats. Patricia's supporters fought back hard. They put up signs, sent email blasts, and held a rally in the community center. But the news story had changed the narrative. People were seeing Patricia for what she really was, and they didn't like it. The election was held on a Saturday in the community center. Nearly 200 homeowners showed up to vote, the highest turnout in Meadowbrook Estates history. When the results were announced that evening, Jennifer had won the presidency with 63% of the vote. The other 2 reform candidates had won their races too. Patricia Winters was out. I thought she might make a scene, but she just sat there in stunned silence as the results were read. When it was over, she gathered her things and walked out without a word. Brenda Morrison, her former vice president, chased after her. "Patricia, wait. We can contest this. We can, it's over, Brenda," I heard Patricia say. "Let it go." The new board's first official act was to drop the appeal of the playground ruling and authorize payment of the damages owed to me. Their second act was to review all the retaliatory fines that had been issued against me and void them. At the next board meeting, Jennifer Kowalski stood up and made a formal apology on behalf of the HOA. "Mr. Palmer, on behalf of the Meadowbrook Estates Home Owners Association, I want to apologize for the illegal and unethical treatment you received from the previous board. Your property rights were violated, you were harassed, and the association abused its authority. We're committed to making sure nothing like this ever happens again. The homeowners present, about 50 of them, actually applauded. It felt surreal after weeks of being the neighborhood villain. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that." And I want to be clear, I never had a problem with the idea of a playground. I just wanted to be asked, not have my property taken without permission. Jennifer nodded. "Understood. Actually, if you're open to it, the new board would like to discuss potentially purchasing or leasing a portion of your lot for community use. No pressure, and only if you're interested." I thought about it. The lot was bigger than I needed for just a workshop. And despite everything, I did want to be part of the community, not at war with it. "I'm open to a conversation," I said. "Let's talk." Over the next month, we negotiated a deal. The HOA would lease the back third of my lot for 99 years at $1 per year. In exchange, they'd build a modest playground there, maintain it at their expense, and I'd have veto power over any design changes. I'd get to keep the front 2/3 for my workshop. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair. And more importantly, it was consensual. The new playground was built that fall. It was smaller than Patricia's grandiose vision, but it was nice. Kids actually played on it, which never would have happened if I'd been forced to tear it down again out of principle. As for Patricia Winters, I barely saw her after the election. She stopped coming to HOA meetings, stopped participating in neighborhood activities. Someone told me she was planning to sell her house and move to a different development where she could find people who share her values. I didn't wish her ill, but I wasn't sorry to see her go either. The damages check from the HOA arrived in November. $92,000, covering all my legal fees, the demolition costs, the restoration work, and a settlement for the harassment. It was more money than I'd expected to ever see from this mess. I used some of it to build my workshop, a beautiful timber frame structure on the front portion of my lot. The rest I put toward my daughter's college fund. She was only 5, but after this experience, I wanted to make sure she'd have options. On a crisp Saturday morning in December, I was in my new workshop, cutting dovetails for a dresser I was building when I heard a knock. It was Bill, my neighbor, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might want a break," he said. We sat on my workshop's porch, looking out over the lot. In the back, I could see kids playing on the new playground, their parents watching from benches the HOA had installed. "You know," Bill said, "when this whole thing started, I thought you were crazy to fight them." "I was a little crazy," I admitted. "No, you were right. And you changed this whole community. People pay attention to what the HOA does now. They ask questions. Jennifer's board actually listens to homeowners instead of dictating to them. It's like a different neighborhood. I'm just glad it's over." "Is it though?" Bill asked. "I heard Patricia's been talking to a lawyer about suing you personally for defamation." I sighed. "Of course she has. Marcus says she has no case, but who knows? Maybe I'll be fighting her for the rest of my life." "Nah," Bill said. "She'll give up eventually. Bullies always do when someone finally stands up to them." I hoped he was right. But even if he wasn't, I didn't regret what I'd done. I'd stood up for my property rights, I'd held an abusive HOA accountable, and I'd helped create a better community in the process. Was it worth all the stress, the conflict, the money, the sleepless nights? Yeah, it was, because at the end of the day, this wasn't really about a playground or a piece of land. It was about the principle that you can't just take what doesn't belong to you, no matter how good your intentions are. It was about standing up to authority when authority overreaches. It was about fighting for what's right, even when it's hard, and if I had to do it all over again, I would. Though maybe next time, I'd buy property in a neighborhood without an HOA. Sarah came out of the house with our daughter, Emma. "Daddy, can we go play on the playground?" Emma asked. I looked at the playground on my lot, the one that had caused so much trouble but that now served its intended purpose. Kids were laughing, parents were chatting, and it all felt normal and good. "Sure, sweetie," I said. "Let's go play." As we walked across the lot together, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. The battle was over. The community was healing, and life was moving forward. Bill called after us. "Hey, Zach, there's an HOA meeting next week. You should come. They're voting on new bylaws to prevent anything like this from happening again." "I'll be there," I called back, because that's what being part of a community means. Not blindly following authoritarian leaders, but participating, questioning, holding people accountable, and working together to make things better. The next week's HOA meeting was packed. Jennifer Kowalski had done an excellent job in her first months as president, and the proposed bylaw changes reflected real reform. The most important one was an amendment to Section 12, subsection 4, changing it back to the original language. Community improvement projects could only be built on property actually owned by the HOA, but there were other changes too. Any fine over $200 would require a hearing before the board where the homeowner could present their defense. Board meetings would be recorded and minutes posted online within 48 hours. And perhaps most importantly, any expenditure over $10,000 would require approval from the general membership, not just the board. These changes are designed to prevent the abuses of power that we saw under the previous administration, Jennifer explained to the assembled homeowners. An HOA should serve its community, not rule it. We're here to maintain property values and provide amenities, not to violate people's rights. The changes passed unanimously. After the meeting, several homeowners came up to thank me. "You did a good thing," one older woman said. "I was terrified of Patricia. She fined me $500 once because my garden gnome was too whimsical. I got rid of it rather than fight her. I wish I'd had your courage." "It's not too late," I said. "The new board is reasonable. Put your gnome back," she laughed. "Maybe I will." As I drove home that night, I reflected on everything that had happened. 6 months ago, I'd been a guy who just wanted to build a workshop. Now I was somehow a neighborhood folk hero for fighting off an authoritarian HOA president. Life is weird, but it was about to get weirder. The next morning, I got a call from Marcus. "Zachary, I need you to sit down for this." My stomach dropped. "What now?" "The state attorney general's office just called me. They're opening an investigation into the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. "An investigation for what?" "Apparently, your case caught their attention. They've been getting complaints about HOA abuses across North Carolina for years, and they're using your situation as a test case. They want to know if Patricia Winters and the former board committed any crimes." Crimes. It was civil trespass, not criminal. Trespass can be criminal if it's willful and involves property damage, but there's more. The AG's office is looking into the HOA's finances. They think Patricia might have been embezzling. I sat down. "You're kidding." I wish I was. Apparently, during the discovery process for our case, some irregularities showed up in the HOA's accounting. The new board noticed them too and reported it. The AG wants to interview you about your interactions with Patricia and the former board. I agreed to cooperate, of course. Over the next several weeks, investigators combed through years of HOA financial records. What they found was stunning. Patricia Winters had been systematically stealing from the HOA for at least 3 years. She'd been approving payments to fake vendors, paying herself consulting fees for work she never did, and even using HOA funds to pay for personal expenses like vacations and car repairs. The total was over $200,000. The playground project, it turned out, had been partially a cover. She'd inflated the costs, paid her cousin's construction company way over market rate, and pocketed the difference. The fact that she'd built it on my property without permission was almost secondary to the fraud. In February, Patricia Winters was arrested at her home on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and criminal trespass. The local news covered it extensively, and I gave another interview explaining how the playground dispute had ultimately exposed a much larger criminal operation. "I just wanted to build a workshop," I told the reporter, and it was the truest thing I'd ever said. Patricia's trial was set for May. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and her attorney was already talking plea deals. If convicted on all charges, she could face up to 10 years in prison. Part of me felt bad for her. She'd clearly had issues, control problems mixed with greed and entitlement. But mostly, I just felt relieved that she'd been stopped before she could hurt anyone else. The Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, meanwhile, was thriving under Jennifer's leadership. The stolen money was being recovered through insurance and legal action against Patricia, and the community was actually coming together in a way it never had before. In March, they held a community barbecue at the playground on my lot. Over 100 people showed up, including me and my family. Kids played on the equipment while parents grilled burgers and hot dogs. Someone set up a volleyball net on another part of the property. It felt good. It felt like what a community should be. Bill found me by the grill, flipping burgers. "You know what the best part of all this is?" he asked. "What's that?" "You taught everyone that they don't have to be afraid of the HOA, that they have rights and can stand up for themselves. Last week, someone's fence was 6 inches too tall according to the old rules. You know what the board did? They voted to change the rule. No fines, no hassle, just common sense." "That's how it should work," I said. "Yeah, but it took you fighting a crazy woman over a playground to make everyone realize that," I laughed. "I guess sometimes change requires a catalyst." My workshop was finished by then, and I'd started taking custom furniture orders. Turns out, the publicity from the HOA case had been good for business. People liked the idea of supporting that guy who fought the HOA and won. Sarah was happy with how everything had turned out too. "I'm proud of you," she told me one evening as we sat on our back porch watching the sunset. "You could have just let them have the playground and avoided all the conflict." "Would you have respected me if I had?" I asked. She thought about it. "Honestly, no. You did the right thing, even though it was hard. That's who you are." It helped that I was right. If I'd been wrong, I would have looked like an idiot. But you weren't wrong. And now Patricia's going to prison, the HOA is actually functional, and we have a playground that our daughter loves. Everything worked out. I guess it did. In May, Patricia Winters pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. She got 5 years in prison and was ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. Her lawyer made a statement about how she'd been under stress and made bad decisions, but nobody was buying it. She'd been a bully and a thief, and now she was paying the price. The day of her sentencing, I didn't go to the courthouse. I was in my workshop, building a crib for my sister's baby when Jennifer called to tell me the news. 5 years, she said, and she has to pay everything back. "Good," I said. "Maybe she'll learn something." I doubt it. People like that never do. But at least she can't hurt anyone else for a while. After we hung up, I stood in my workshop, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and the tools I loved, and I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude that I'd stood up for myself. Gratitude that the legal system had worked eventually. Gratitude that my community had come together to create something better. The playground on my lot was busy that afternoon. I could hear kids laughing and playing as I worked. It made me smile. This whole crazy journey had started with me discovering construction equipment on my property without permission. It had led through court battles, neighborhood politics, recall elections, and ultimately exposed a criminal enterprise. It had been stressful and expensive and exhausting. But it had been worth it, because now I had my workshop. The community had its playground, legally and ethically installed on land they actually had permission to use. The HOA was reformed and functional, and a woman who'd abused her power for years was finally being held accountable. Sometimes standing up for what's right is messy and difficult. Sometimes it costs money and time and peace of mind. Sometimes it makes you enemies and causes conflict, but it's still worth doing. Emma came running into the workshop, her cheeks flushed from playing. "Daddy, can you come push me on the swings?" I set down my tools. "Of course, sweetheart." As I walked with my daughter across the lot toward the playground, past the invisible property line that had caused so much trouble, I thought about how strange life can be. A year ago, I'd been planning to use this whole space for a workshop. Now, part of it was a community playground, and I was okay with that, better than okay. I was happy about it, because it had happened the right way, through conversation and compromise and mutual respect. Not through force or deception or abuse of power. I pushed Emma on the swings while other parents watched their kids play. Bill was there with his grandkids. Jennifer was there with her twins. Even George Tucker, the 73-year-old who'd been one of my first petition signers, was there with his wife. "Beautiful day," George called to me. "It really is," I agreed. And it was. The sun was shining, kids were playing, and the community I'd fought so hard to reform was thriving. My workshop stood proud on the front of the lot, a testament to perseverance and property rights. The playground occupied the back third, a testament to compromise and community. It wasn't the outcome I'd originally envisioned when I bought this land, but it was better. Because it was earned, not stolen. It was collaborative, not authoritarian. It was right. That evening, after Emma was in bed, I sat in my workshop and started sketching plans for a new project, a picnic table for the playground area. I'd build it and donate it to the HOA, a peace offering and a symbol of moving forward. Sarah found me there around 10, hunched over my drawings. "You're building something for the playground." "Yeah, seems like the right thing to do." She kissed the top of my head. "You're a good man, Zachary Palmer. I'm just a guy who wanted to build a workshop. You're a guy who stood up to a bully, reformed an HOA, exposed a criminal, and helped create a better community. Give yourself some credit." Maybe she was right. Maybe I had done something important. Not because I'd set out to be a hero, but because I'd refused to be a victim. The picnic table took me 3 weeks to build, working evenings and weekends. I used cedar, which would weather well, and designed it big enough to seat 8 comfortably. When it was done, I enlisted Bill's help to carry it down to the playground. We set it up under a big oak tree at the edge of the play area, and within hours, families were using it. Kids ate snacks there. Parents sat and chatted. Someone left a note on it. "Thank you for this beautiful table and for everything you did for our community." I didn't need thanks. The table, the playground, the reformed HOA, the workshop, all of it was thanks enough. Meadowbrook Estates had become a real community, not just a collection of houses ruled by a petty tyrant. And I had my workshop, my peace of mind, and my property rights intact. Sometimes the right battles are worth fighting, even when they're hard, especially when they're hard. Because that's how real change happens. Not through rolling over and accepting injustice, but through standing up and demanding better. I'd learned that lesson in the most unexpected way, through a dispute over a playground built without permission on my lot. But it was a lesson I'd carry with me for the rest of my life. As I locked up my workshop that night and walked back to my house, I paused to look at the playground one more time. In the moonlight, the swings swayed gently in the breeze, and the whole scene looked peaceful and right. This was home. This was community, and I'd fought to make it that way. That was enough.